Welcome to the Qualified Tutor podcast. Here at QT, our mission is to provide teacher training for tutors. If you are a motivated tutor and you love to learn, the QT podcast will inspire, motivate, and support you to improve your practice. Because tutoring is a small job that makes a big difference. Hello and welcome to the next instalment of the Qualified Tutor podcast. Today, we'll be speaking to Josh Dean, an inspiring tutor based in Jerusalem, Israel, with real experience in his area of expertise and a wealth of experience in predominantly online, but also face-to-face tutoring. Josh is in an excellent position to give advice to those tutors looking to get into online tutoring, or those who have recently taken the plunge. What with the recent situation, we know that obviously online tutoring is booming at the moment. So hello, Josh. How are you doing from Jerusalem?
Hi, thank you for having me. Doing very well, thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah. So there's been some traveling recently. Is that right? Where have you just come back from?
Yep. So I just spent 2 weeks in the United States, in Boston, back visiting where I was studying my master's there. Visiting friends back there, and managed to be not too affected travel-wise by the whole coronavirus. I made it back to Israel okay and in one piece. So yeah.
Yes, very good. Well, that's certainly very lucky to have made it back. I know there's some that didn't quite get that far. But how did you get into the world of tutoring, Josh?
Well, basically, I got into it through a few times in my life so far, having had a period where I wasn't necessarily tied down to a certain place or a certain job, and I had freed up a fair amount of time to do various things while I was waiting to start a new job, or in the holidays of university during my university years. And I found that tutoring was a good way and a fun way to earn some money on the side, and also teach things that I enjoy teaching and that I enjoyed learning myself. So it's kind of been in those in-between periods where I first got into tutoring, and that includes online tutoring as well. Partly thanks to the flexibility that it offers, and also not having to necessarily make very long-term commitments. So that's how I first got into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So just talk us through, Josh, what subjects you tutor, and maybe why you've chosen those ones.
Yes, sure. Well, as for formally tutoring in paid lessons, I've been teaching foreign languages. The ones that I've tutored are French and Modern Hebrew. It is also true to say that I've tutored a fair number of students for their religious studies GCSE as well many years ago, but that wasn't being paid. It was tutoring, I guess, but it wasn't standard. Standard session each week or anything like that. It was much more informal. As for why I chose to tutor modern languages, the reason would be that I would only want to tutor a subject that I really do feel comfortable in my own ability to give good education about those subjects. And so I'd say part of it would be that, for example, with the tutoring modern Hebrew, currently in Israel, it's mainly the language that I'm using in everyday life. It's the language here, so I definitely feel comfortable, saying that I can tutor that, given that I'm speaking it most of the time here and interacting in it. So that's one reason. The other reason as well has got to do with not just what I want to do, but with the demand as well. I would love to teach Middle Eastern history and politics, but there's just less of a demand for tuition in that topic.
You'd have no one to pay you for that.
Maybe I can work it in a little bit to the language stuff, but overall, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so that brings out a very important point about tutoring, doesn't it? That
yes,
tutors, there's this constant interplay between tutoring the demand that there is out there and tutoring what you want to tutor. I certainly, just picking up on what you said about only wanting to tutor things that you feel absolutely comfortable in, I think as I've been looking for a lot of work in the past year or so, I have probably found myself tutoring things that I wouldn't have at the beginning said that I was comfortable in. But
I see.
you, in order to pick up enough work, you often find yourself tutoring things or tutoring subjects that you wouldn't necessarily have put down maybe as your top 5 subjects.
Sure. What I would say about that is, I guess it also depends on the amount of preparation time that you have individual session. I mean, for example, tutoring a subject that you do feel very confident in your ability to teach and give sessions in, then it doesn't require as much preparation time maybe. But it's not to say that you can't teach subjects that you're less familiar with. Of course you can, like you say, but probably it requires some more preparation time on your part.
Yeah, exactly. Josh, this is a question that we often produces very interesting answers and interesting in the context of what that tutor or that teacher then kind of went on to do later on. But what kind of student were you, Josh? And did you ever have a tutor yourself?
Yes, I did have several tutors over the years. What kind of student was I? I'm probably not the best person to judge myself. Maybe this might be a biased answer, but I think I was pretty hardworking, and I tended to be a pretty good student. I got good grades mainly. One thing that I definitely would say about myself is that I'm not an all-rounder. So I had some at school. I had some subjects that I was very strong in, be it English literature, philosophy, and then modern languages, of course. And then there were other subjects that I was pretty weak in, or let's say that they required a lot more effort on my part. So,
and that's where the tutor steps in, is it?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I should work that in. So, yes, I did have a fair amount of maths tuition, because that was really my weakest subject, and I also was not very strong in the sciences. All the STEM field really was a weaker point for me. I did incidentally also have a tutor for a year at age 10, 11 in preparation for my entrance exam to secondary school. All sorts of verbal and non-verbal reasoning and reading comprehension exercises, also maths as well. So it was because I wasn't much of an all-rounder that I myself had a fair amount of tutoring, because often, passing certain exams or, the GCSEs or whatever, you can't just have good grades in a few subjects and then really poor grades in others, so I was having to kind of top up the weaker subjects.
Yeah. And do you think your experiences with the tutors you have, or tutors you had, shaped the way you tutor now? Do you think there are maybe even just subliminal things or subconscious things that they instilled in you that you've carried on today?
I hope so.
They were good, were they?
I mean, just in general, the idea of someone who's seeking tuition in a certain subject, or at least in many cases, it could be because they are struggling in that subject and they need extra help. So as for those kind of students, I do feel a certain degree of empathy, because I know what it's like to feel like you're banging your head against a wall and you're trying to understand a certain concept and it's not coming naturally. And, it does require a lot of patience. And so I hope that I try to definitely kind of offer that patience as a tutor, because I know what it feels like to be in that position, which maybe I wouldn't otherwise. But, these days I'm tutoring subjects that always came very naturally to me. Obviously, I'm not tutoring maths, thank goodness for me, I was able to say goodbye to that a number of years ago. So maybe if I didn't have that experience of struggling myself, then if I were tutoring the subjects that I feel very, very comfortable in today, I wouldn't be as patient. That's my hope, at least.
Yes, well, I'm sure when obviously we ask your students for feedback, and they can tell us more honestly whether you show
Yes,
patience or not, Josh.
that's right.
But actually, doing this slightly towards the student, because obviously tutoring, the student plays such a key role in relationship and in how you tutor and in what you tutor.
Yeah.
Kind of in the field of confidence, which is again so important for students. How have you found that when a student of yours is struggling with confidence in their own ability for the subject, what kind of are your top tips for remedying this to those tutors listening?
Yeah, no, that's a very good question. A few things I would say. One thing is, at least that I try and do, particularly if I can see that a student's struggling with a certain subject, is I try and get them to focus on the things that they can do. Because there's always things that they can do. They might be the more basic things at the start, but at least by showing them that they do have some grasp of the topic, then they feel more confident to go further with it. Otherwise, if the student feels like they're failing at everything, they're going to get exasperated and be less motivated. So I would say that one of the things I do is just try and focus on the small victories and get them to focus on that first. Give them the courage and motivation to progress. And I guess what's also a part of that is that I try not to worry too much if that means going very slowly at times, because there could be a tendency to think, okay, in this lesson I want to get through all this material, but actually maybe on only a small bit of what you prepared to teach, you end up spending the whole hour. But so I think, that it's important to remember that is what tutoring is about.
Yeah.
That to be able to have that extra time and that extra attention, one-on-one usually, to be able to focus on that. So my advice for anyone teaching a student who's really struggling is to not worry about taking it slowly, and kind of build their confidence by small steps.
Yeah, but that's a really actually a key point. Actually, is that that is kind of often why a parent or a child or just a learner seeks out tutoring in the first place, is because they want things to be taken more slowly. So that's a really key point actually to bring out, really. And in kind of the same vein, Josh, what kind of advice do you have? Really very general advice for tutors starting out with online tutoring, is it compared to, let's say, face-to-face tutoring, which has been much more prevalent in the education profession for many years. Sure. But is there something that you can, maybe some inside tips you can give about online tutoring for those looking to start out?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I was a little bit, to be brutally honest, I was a little bit apprehensive myself about the idea of online tutoring before I started. And it is, it is different from face-to-face tutoring. I would say, first of all, that draw the positives from it. There's the very fact that both of you are sitting there with a computer while the tutoring session is happening opens a lot of doors for different things you can do. At least in the kind of the language, modern language tutoring I've been doing, that enables me to send links to my students of, often I'll do like music videos, and they can watch the music video during the session, and then I can bring up the lyrics on a different web page that, in the click of a finger quickly. Yeah. I can also do screen sharing where, because initially I had a worry about, how will I be able to see what my students writing and vice versa. But screen sharing kind of solves that issue, because I can put my screen sharing on, and then the student can see in real time what I'm typing, and then, the same the other way around. One thing I would focus on is kind of making the most out of the opportunities that the technology offers that you wouldn't necessarily think to use in a regular face-to-face tutoring session. Another piece of advice I would give to a tutor who's starting online tutoring is, and this, I would say this applies more to if you've got younger students, that to beware that having a computer offers a lot of distractions potentially, and it is also part of human psychology. I think that it's easier to switch off in an online conversation. If you and I are sitting next to each other in real life, then it's much more difficult to just switch your brain off than if I'm just kind of audio that you're hearing. And because of that, I think one of the key pieces of advice I would give is to make sure that the student is actively doing exercises, actively, you're giving them exercises in which they have to speak, they have to write, they have to do something, because if it's just an extended monologue, I mean, no tutoring session should be like that in an ideal world, but particularly an online session, because if you're offering an extended monologue and you're, just on the screen, then that could, lead to the student losing their concentration or even being distracted by other things on the computers. So I guess that's a few pieces of advice I would give about online tutoring.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, actually, isn't it? Is that even when you're trying to focus, something can pop up on your screen, something can, notifications, noises, texts, all that kind of thing,
exactly.
which can be much more easily sort of nullified in face-to-face tutoring. Actually, right. I read a little piece of advice recently, actually, which mentioned how in online tutoring, both the student and the tutor should share their screens, because obviously the tutor may be sharing their screen to share documents that they want the student to work on, but the student should also share their screen so that the tutor can kind of see what's also on their screen, and so even that the student's attention is drawn towards that. Things like full screen for the document that they're working on, not kind of half screen. Even little things like that are really keeping concentration, especially in kind of an hour and a half or 2 hour session. But Josh, now this is kind of touches on maybe some of the things that you've already talked about, but in an actual online session, so sort of less generally, is there something that you always do at the end of each session? Is there something that you really feel you have taken on board that you could share with us? Obviously, we're not going to take your industry secrets from you, and if this is something you've never heard anyone else do, then please do keep this to yourself. But is there anything that you could share with us that you do at the start or at the end of each session?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say it's something that's specific to online tutoring, but something that I always trying to do at the start and end of every session, whichever method of tutoring it is, be it online or not, is to try and start by offering a reminder, like a recap about what we did in the previous session. And then at the end of each session, trying to wrap up all the things we've done that day, particularly because I think it's important to remember that tutoring sessions are happening amidst people's busy lives, and they might not have a lot of time to review the material that had been done in the previous session. It's almost like if you're watching a TV series and you're up to episode 15, and then you're watching one new episode each week, and then by the time the next week comes around, you need a recap of the whole plot, just so you can know when you come to watch episode 16, okay, where am I now, because I can't remember everything that happened in episode 15. So based on the same kind of logic as that, I always try and bookend the sessions with a little recap from the previous week at the beginning, and then a kind of summary at the end. So from what I've heard, that's kind of like starts and finishes are focusing on them are quite an effective tool for learning, because we tend to remember more of what's in the start and the finish than all the blurry bit in the middle.
Yes, exactly. As a student, I probably wouldn't have accepted that I switched off in that way. But actually, in all honesty, you probably do not listen to much of what happens in the middle of a session, actually in a classroom or in a tutoring session. And also, I just think that even for the tutor yourself, looking at it from the tutor's point of view, going back over what you've done that session in your own mind clears things up a bit, shows whether you have been able to complete what you had aimed to complete in that session. And again, kind of shows the progress that you've made in that session, even if it's only small steps. Just summing up at the end, if it's 7 things, let's say, you've done in that session, even if only briefly, that's a real achievement, isn't it? That you've managed to go over, understand a little bit better 7 different things. It might be
definitely
grammar points in Hebrew.
I mean, what I would also say about that is that particularly for online tutoring sessions, when you start the session, of course you say hi and ask how the student's doing, but it could seem a bit, it takes also for the tutor some time to get into that zone of the session. So it's a nice little transition phase that you can go, okay, so what did we do last week? Mm-hmm. And then if you were just to say, hi, how are you? Okay, now explain to me this. Okay, now go to this exercise. It would be a bit too immediate maybe. So it's just kind of settling the tutor in as well as the students. So
yeah. And this perhaps leads us on very nicely to the next point that I wanted to kind of bring up, which is a really good way of helping those people that are looking to get into tutoring with real kind of relatable advice is, what do you wish you'd known when you began tutoring that you now know?
Well, for me, that's actually a very easy one to answer because knowing myself, I have always liked to, and to this day continue to want to work in a very regimented way. I like making lists. I like having everything in order, know what I'm going to do when and how. What I would say, though, is that I wish I'd known that tutoring a student is filled with unexpected twists and turns. I had this vision in mind. I was going to plan the entire schedule and I would know exactly what we were doing every week of every session, but that's just not how it works. And I wish I'd been more aware of that, less naive about that at the start, because, let's take, grammar points as an example of a certain language. You just don't know in advance how easy it's going to be for your student to pick up one particular grammar point and how difficult it might be for them to really grasp another. So it really is the case, in my experience with the tutoring, that you can focus just on one small point for 2 or 3 entire sessions, and then you can be thinking, oh gosh, I spent all this time on this one small point and now I don't have much time for other stuff. But actually you come to the next concept you want to teach and they just get it like that super quickly. And so I feel like it all kind of balances out in the end. So what I wish I'd known from the start is that much as I'd like to, you cannot plan it and set it all in stone, how all the sessions are going to go and what you're going to teach when. And, like we said before about the very reason for tutoring often is because a student is struggling with a certain subject and they need that extra time. And so, I wish I'd known not to worry too much about that because that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah, so having some sort of maybe wider awareness of the fact that sessions aren't going to take this regimented structure, and that you do have to be adaptable as a tutor to fit in extra points if they're not understood, or go back a little bit if you're going too fast.
Absolutely.
Now, Josh, I would just like to finish with this question, which I think maybe if I'm right, you may have already talked about earlier on. What is the single most important attribute, do you think, for a tutor to have?
Okay. I would say that the single most important attribute would be probably just to be an approachable person. think you can't underestimate, particularly if it's face-to-face tutoring, how should I describe it, when that someone's inviting you into their home often, and you're just sitting one-on-one. I think the most important skill as a tutor is to be able to put the student at ease, so they can just focus on the learning and not worry about making mistakes with you, not worry about feeling underconfident, and that once that trust's been built between the tutor and the student, then I find that everything else seems to flow much more naturally. Providing that the tutor knows what they're on about, which which they should. That should be a given.
Yes, we assume that you've done at least your homework on the subject you're teaching.
Yes. So to be able to put your students at ease, that is what I would say is the one most important attribute.
Good. Well, I hope that those listening, that's the final thing they take away, because that is really one of the most important points I think about tutoring is that approachability, that relatability, and putting people at ease. It's very easy to concentrate and focus and learn when you're at ease. So,
for sure.
Thank you really, very, very much, Josh.
Thank you. You're very welcome.
Really, really useful to get kind of up-to-date advice and tips from someone currently working kind of in online tutoring. There really is no better way of eliciting this than by talking to someone who currently does it. I think online tutoring, as I'm sure you'll agree, will be a key part of education in the years to come, and actually, kind of recent developments, recent global are really only accelerating that.
It's very topical.
Exactly. So let's make sure that we get that podcast in nice and quick. So thank you really, very, very much, Josh, for taking the time. We're very, very lucky to have had you on. I hope everyone has enjoyed listening to that, and I know that there are things that people can take from that. So we wish you all the best. And
Great.
We'll speak to you again very, very soon, Josh. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay.
Thanks for listening to the Qualified Tutor podcast, where tutors share their expertise to support the tutoring community. We're always looking for motivated tutors to interview on the show. If you'd like to be part of the conversation, get in touch at podcast@qualifiedtutor.org. We'd love to learn from you.